So some economic modelling has stolen all the headlines this morning. It's on the front page of the Australian. It's modelling that's been done from the New South Wales Treasurer, which makes the case for what would cost, what the cost would be if it goes into mid-September. It's got a lot of people concerned about that. What do you make of it?
Look, I'd heard the New South Wales Premier's reaction to it this morning on Ben Fordham. I don't think there's anything more to it than it's prudent modelling of alternative scenarios. I think look, no one, even if they have a crystal ball, could predict where we'll be out to in September. It's certainly my hope that the lockdown will be lifted well before then, as I'm sure it is the Premiers and everyone around New South Wales and indeed Australia. But it really does depend upon how we go with this. And, we're seeing a situation, of course, where the lockdown we're currently in is, in Sydney terms, more severe than the one we were in last year, but the case numbers are still not coming down. And that's a product of a more contagious variant that we're dealing with, the Delta variant.
It seems fair enough to me that you would do economic modelling to factor in worst case scenarios, right?
Oh, look, I think governments model scenarios all the time, and they're often bad scenarios because you always hope for the best and plan for the worst. Exactly. So I think I'm sure the story is well sourced in the sense that modelling is being done, but I don't think it reflects policy, and that's always the difference here. What's policy and what's modelling? Do
you think Sydney needs to go harder?
I think we're going pretty hard, Peter, and I think it's having quite an impact on the economy. I mean, this is a more severe lockdown than last year. We've got construction sites that are all stopped. We've got hairdressers closed, salons closed. Any number of businesses that weren't closed in the last lockdown are closed now, and it's having a pretty big impact on people's mental health and on livelihoods. We've obviously got to try and get control of this outbreak, but I think we probably need to start looking at a somewhat more localised or gradated response, concentrated on the geographies and the industries and the areas where the disease is most rampant, and perhaps looking at easing up in some of the areas where there are no active cases and there's no reports of transmission.
Okay, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about that anyway. How do you do that? How do you do that without building resentment in the community?
Look, it's difficult, but we've done this before. I mean, look, different parts of Australia have been in different stages of the lockdown, and I know it's not great for national harmony and national spirit, but we do it because that's where the evidence takes us and where the risks take us. In last December's lockdown was confined largely to the northern beaches, with the rest of Sydney didn't go about doing this. So I think communities accept that if they've got a large number of cases, and their own fear will dictate this. They don't want to be out and about so much. They don't want to be catching the disease. They don't want to be transmitting it. There's a sensible case there, provided those communities are supported by the government, for them to have a different degree of lockdown than some other communities.
So yeah,
I mean, this is an easy exercise to whiteboard or to theorise. I know in practice this is a lot more difficult, and you've got adjoining LGAs and a huge number of Sydney's a very connected city. It's hard to just say you cut off one road and that contains the virus. It doesn't work like that.
Like you say, it's a connected city. It's the engine for the nation's economy, really. So what you're saying is, while cases are still very high in the city's southwest, and there's not many cases, for example, your electorate, I don't think there's many cases there at the moment, that should be eased up. Those economies should be allowed to open up again. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to talk my own book here, and I think there are still cases in the eastern suburbs, but there are LGAs, like the northern beaches.
There's not many, though.
The North Shore and the hills, where there's really been no cases of any incidents, and provided that we're limiting or eliminating movement between those LGAs and ones where there are active cases, it should be possible to do. I mean, we do this between Sydney and its surrounds. We do this between states. We've done this all through the crisis. We don't put Australia into a lockdown. We put the area affected into a lockdown. And I think the longer this goes on for, the more that case becomes compelling, because, Sydney's 5 million people. New South Wales is a third of the national economy. This is causing a lot of economic hurt, just as Melbourne's lockdown did last year. But we just, if we can avoid that level of pain, I think we should seek to do so.
Okay, JobKeeper 3.0. Do you believe it is needed?
Well, we've effectively got JobKeeper now, Peter. I mean, the disaster payments that are going out are at the same level as JobKeeper was when
the back end of it, though, yeah.
And in the December quarter, I take that point, but it's also happening more quickly because it's not being intermediated through businesses. People aren't needing to prove a reduction in turnover. They just need to show a loss in hours. It's being more effective now. I think the longer this goes on, though, we'll be worried not just about workers' livelihoods, but we'll also start to worry about the viability of businesses. And I think that's when we might need to look at additional business support measures, depending on how long this goes on for. And that will be a joint federal-state enterprise. And I know, the Federal Treasurer is having active and regular discussions with his New South Wales counterpart. I think that's what we might need to look at. So I think getting money into people's pockets is what's happening now, and helping them get through this, but helping businesses get through this is going to be the tougher proposition. Yeah. And that's why I was making the case earlier that if businesses can safely get back to work, let's allow them to get back to work.
I tell you what, if it's mid-September that the lockdown goes until, JobKeeper 3.0 has definitely got to come into play, wouldn't you have thought?
Look, if it's mid-September that we're talking about,
worst case, yeah.
As I said, I'm not buying into that necessarily, but yeah, look, I think the assistance measures we'll need to put in place will look different to those that we've got in place right now, undoubtedly.
Okay, Dave Sharma, good to chat. Talk to you soon.